All right, Howard. Well, why don't we get started? We got this recorded, so we're going to be sending this out to all of our audience afterwards. So if you miss anything, don't worry. We got a lot of great information today. So I think we are good to go. Let me just put this in here. Awesome. So appreciate everybody joining today. Today we have Howard Chung, one of the people I've known in the industry for a long time. Very interesting person in the industry. Worked with John L. Scott for a long time. Been in the industry in general for a long time. Most recently with John L. Scott, Vice President of Franchise Development. Was also working on technology there for a long time, and also recently, one of the very interesting things he's been working on is co-founder of Green Ocean TV, which is a really cool LMS platform specifically built for this industry, which I think is addressing some needs that a lot of people are not talking about out there, especially when it comes to management and leadership in this industry that might be a little different than you think. So today the topic is about redefining, you know, management in this industry. Less admin, more profit. That's how we're talking about it. Really, I'm going to have Howard do the majority of the talking. That's going to be a good webinar. Let's have Howard actually do most of the talking here. But really talking about, a lot of real estate brokers and managers and leaders in general are very bogged down by all of the different operational things that they need to be doing. How should they be looking at leadership during this time? How have things changed over time? And has there been an evolution that they should be taking into account in redefining what leadership is in the real estate world today? So uh, let's just jump right into it. Hey, Howard, how's it going?
It's going well, man. How are you?
Doing well, doing well.
We got a sunny day in Seattle. How about
There you go. So that's
that?
how you know
It
it's going
is
to be
summer after all, so it's like it's what we expect at this time of year.
the couple times a year that you're getting good sun in Seattle.
Yeah, the
That's
secret is the summers, man. The summers are just amazing here. So anybody who's been to Seattle, they know the summers can be really, really nice.
I know it's this balance. You don't want to talk too good about Seattle because so many
Oh, the
people
word
move
is out. The
there.
people who know, they've been moving here for a gazillion years now. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
word's been out.
it's the funny part. Anybody who lives in Seattle says, "Hey, I'm in real estate. I want people to come here, but at the same time, I'm not going to tell you too many good things about Seattle because you can't have too many people." It's great to hear. So, Howard, do you mind just to kind of get us started here, give a little bit of background on your background, your experience in real estate, and especially some of the new ventures that you've been doing that I think everybody's going to be interested in.
Yeah, so I think I got into real estate really early. I went to University of Washington, and I was actually traveling and met my wife abroad. During college actually. So I met her in, of all places, Israel. And so it's like as soon as we were back, back home in the U.S. and she was in Michigan. I'm from Seattle, and we said, oh, okay, let's get married. And so my first job, because she was an academic and she got into a Harvard graduate program. So well, I got to work, so we got married right out of college, and so there was a big sign that said now hiring at the Century 21 near Harvard Square. And so I said, okay, well, I'll walk in here and see what kind of job they have to offer. And sure enough, I was very successful, not knowing anybody or anything like that. But by the third year, I was the number one agent for Century 21 in the East Coast, and there was a lot of systems in place, and I loved the business. I hated the hours, but I got off to a really good, successful sales career. Then I moved back to Seattle. Eventually ended up owning my own John L. Scott franchise. I've been working back and forth with John L. Scott in different capacities actually for close to 20 years now. So I love my company. So my most recent role as VP of franchise development, it's been a really great journey to kind of be in every different position almost, right? From sales to assistant management, coaching, and all these things. Of course, through that journey, you got all the technology, of course, advances and changes that have happened. And I love that kind of stuff, marketing and technology. So how can that be incorporated? So I've really just been, kind of part of the growth in many respects of seeing what's happening in the industry, a lot of friends out there, and really checking in, what are the paradigm shifts, not just the trends, but what are really the paradigm shifts? And so again, my wife has a big part in terms of like, I guess, my journey in real estate because she is actually an organizational psychologist. So she actually teaches at Seattle Pacific University. And so where, organizational psychology is all about the psychology of work, right? And so many of the popular books we read in management and leadership, how Amazon or Google or these companies really try to recruit and retain the best talent. How do they basically formulate management and leadership? And so there's a lot of paradigms that have been happening internationally for years, and more recently, of course, in the United States. But I feel like in the real estate space, right, we basically have oftentimes salespeople, agents who go into management, right, become brokers, and they've never really had formal training, right? And so I think that's part of the conversation that we really need to dive into because, leadership often, we just kind of say, oh, yeah, I'm not a manager, I'm a leader. But well, what's really behind that? What's the science behind that? What are your leadership strengths? What are your leadership skills? What actual kind of approach or philosophy or learning have you had when it comes to leadership? And oftentimes we find, well, I went to a seminar, right? Or I learned from the leaders who were in front of me, or I do what my colleagues do, fellow brokers. And so I feel like, to a large degree, we haven't advanced in that leadership space. Whereas, a bunch of my wife's colleagues, for example, they get an academic PhD degree in organizational psychology, and then they go work for Zillow, for example, right? And helping, these large, venture-backed companies. And it's kind of time for us to really understand and dive deeper into leadership skills and how that can actually be really beneficial for us in real estate, growth, right? And this message isn't just to managers, right, or brokers. It's also to agents, because one of the biggest things, of course, is teams. So a lot of the people, of course, who are listening in, it's just like, well, I'm either part of a team or I eventually want to have my own team. Guess what? You need leadership skills, right? Because we've all seen and heard those experiences where people will join a team or they're leading a team and they don't have the leadership skills exactly. So they just kind of do what they think is best. And a lot of times, they're kind of going down a wrong path. Or it's oftentimes personality based. And I know even in the personality space, whether Myers-Briggs or DISC or emotional intelligence or one of the Enneagrams or all these other kind of, tools that are available, some of those can be really good. But again, there's a lot of skills, I think, in the leadership space that haven't been talked about in the real estate industry. We talk about technology, we talk about lead generation, we talk about conversion solutions, we talk about iBuyers, we talk about third-party portals and all these other things. But man, do I need to talk about leadership, right? And that is just a topic that I feel like is often not really we don't dive deep enough, right? Deep enough in those layers. So a good example is I just listened to what was her name? I think her last name was Scott. There was they were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and from Dillbeck, and that was a great episode that Gabrielle did. But an example
Tamia
like that.
Scott.
Pardon?
That was Tamia Scott. We did
Tamia
it.
Scott. Tamia, yeah.
I believe it
Really
was last
great.
week.
I mean, topic. So I thought it was going to be a marketing conversation, and it was just such a great kind of breath of fresh air in terms of talking about us and in leadership. How do we have conversations? How do we facilitate conversations around Black Lives Matter, for example, right? So that we're not, when we talk about oftentimes fair housing, it's from a perspective of, oh, well, we want to be compliant, right? But really the deeper philosophical, like, what are we trying to accomplish? What's really important? Like, that requires leadership. That requires a philosophy, something that's much deeper. So I think, that topic overall, it's not like we're trying to avoid or we don't want to grow as leaders. It's just that oftentimes, there's not enough attention brought forward into that space, into that discussion. And so what do we have? We've got generations of deal doctors, right? We've got a lot of people who are really great with sales, deal doctoring, transactional excellence. All that is great and important, of course, but that's kind of along the line in what is called full range leadership, is that's kind of more on the transactional leadership, not transformational leadership. And I think that's, if we've got time, I'd love to go a little bit into the concept of transformational leadership, because that's really where the inspiration and, becoming this idealized leader and, some of the real elements that is more required today than ever before, I feel like, so that's just kind of a little bit of a background. Right now, as I lead, kind of the franchise owner. So at John L. Scott, we've got 3,300 agents. About half the agents and franchises, I basically help guide and lead in that group. And so there, we're talking much more about these leadership skills, mindset skills, these skills that historically we haven't talked through enough, right? And of course, in the industry, we talk about recruiting all the time.
Right.
So what do you recruit to? Well, of course, we recruit to technology, the marketing, maybe I've got lower fees or I've got a great culture. And all those things are important, right? Being able to talk about those things, but are you able to talk about your leadership skills, how you lead, what your leadership team actually looks like, right? And so I think those are kind of the areas that, again, are often neglected. And we need to dive deep, we need to, understand some of the science, I guess, that's behind some of that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a helpful understanding of that paradigm shift that you're talking about. And I'm interested in why do you think this shift is happening, and why do you think real estate has been behind on taking up that shift? When you talk about, the tech companies doing this, and when you bring up Zillow and a lot of, why is this shift happening, and why is real estate a little bit behind here? And then what should we be doing? I want to touch on that transformational transactional differences.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, first and foremost, right? I mean, so many of the firms that are out there, right? The brokers, again, started out as agents often, right? And then you go into the transaction. And so that's really where the focus has been. It's just a natural progression that's where it would be. And so your value proposition was, oh, I'm really good at deal doctoring. I'm really good at, in that space. And here's the thing, right? We feel good when we help an agent, a newer agent, even an experienced agent with deal doctoring. And so if that was your strength, and every time they come to you and you give a really good answer, you feel good, there's this transaction that's taken place. And so you've kind of established that this is my value, whether it's spoken or unspoken. That's really just where things have been, right? And so then, of course, you do see a progress where then leadership or firms that really have a strong marketing department or technology. And so they're like, oh, we are also really good with leads, or we're really good with technology. So then that'll be the primary conversation, right? Or some of the different kind of models that come in and say, hey, we're really low cost, right? That's our kind of model. And we've got other kind of systems and solutions in place. But I mean, there has been progression, I think over the years in varying levels. But I mean, right now, we're just at this really interesting time where we're being more challenged as an industry than ever before, right? Not just with COVID, but, with iBuyers and just, more and more, I guess, large companies realizing, boy, there's a lot of money in real estate. There's a lot of opportunities there. And so again, because they're backed, right, they look for people who have degrees, who went to, the Harvard Business Schools maybe. And so they have some of those experiences. And so, again, it's not that, again, it was forgotten. It's just that it was never really introduced in a systematic way. And so the closest thing might be, hey, there's great conferences, there's Inman and, these other places where oftentimes it's executive level. And so you hear from, thought leaders and those kind of things. But in terms of actual skills, training skills of leadership into management, real estate management, that part, again, it's a lot of that is newer. Even like the Amazons, for example, I mean, they have changed. Even Google has changed in terms of, their kind of approach to leadership over the last 10 years or so. So, I mean, it's just kind of natural that we would be a little bit further behind there. But yeah, so I mean, in terms of just like the reason why, I think that's oftentimes the part. But this is a really good time. I think, we've all had this situation right now during COVID. Man, I need to step back a bit. I need to reflect, right? I'm handling the current crisis, but I also need to have vision in terms of, if I'm going to be in this business for the next 5, 10 plus years, I better figure out a leadership strategy. Right? Because again, if all of a sudden historically, I was talking about my amazing space, my amazing culture. Well, shoot, what if people are coming in, even especially now, they're not coming into your space as much. They're not. And in fact, if there is no culture because they're not coming in to feel that culture, wow, those are two pretty big parts, of my value proposition. Yeah, and the deal doctoring part, of course I can still do that via Zoom and stuff. But there's so many more systems there, and that's just a commodity at this point. Anybody can do that kind of stuff. So as a leader, as a broker, as a manager, where am I really gonna say, man, I'm gonna put my this is where I'm saying I'm gonna be the best in the world at what? And if you're really, really good at coaching, If you're really good at higher productivity, if you're really, really good at understanding those leadership skills, then that's something that, again, the AI can't really, artificial intelligence can't take that part, right? Machine learning can't take that part. Robotics can't take that part. But myself, really becoming a true coach and understanding the difference between coaching, training, mentoring, all the different nuances of those skills, it's very different. So again, as a transactional leader, somebody has a question regarding a really complicated deal, of course you should still give the answer, right? But then can you also coach so that that agent becomes kind of a deeper thinking person such as yourself, maybe in terms of how to work through that process, right? And all of a sudden you created this culture of just better transactional people. But beyond that, you've really established the fact that your value to them is more of this, again, transformational individual, right? So I mean, that's all kind of part of the process, I think, right now that we got to think through.
Sure. What I think is interesting is that we, unlike the old saying where those who can't do teach, this industry seems to be those who can do go into leadership and teaching roles. And so, with that being the case, that's where what you're saying, you see this transactional type leadership versus the transformational. So it's obviously, we don't fall into that category in this industry. But does that mean you clearly seem to land more on the side of, if I am a broker and I own a brokerage and I have multiple sales managers underneath me, it's not necessarily don't hire great salespeople to become sales managers, but it's to train better. Or is it a hiring thing? So how do you look at that as leadership in a brokerage, looking at your management structure and understanding, okay, should I spend the resources and where do I spend those resources to train, or do I just need to change how I'm thinking about hiring?
Yeah, I think obviously the answer is always going to be, well, it could be both, right? But ultimately, we always just want to start off with good people, right? And one of the in this full range kind of model, there's something called authentic leadership that is the foundation of this kind of transactional transformational model. And this kind of authentic leader is somebody, and it starts off with something that's important, and I think we'll all resonate with this. Is, have you ever worked for somebody who didn't have a moral compass?
Hmm.
Right, a moral compass. And I think maybe that particular phrase, I mean, it's going to hit people differently, right? If you think about leadership and moral compass. But yeah, I mean, you want to work for somebody, you want to be led by somebody with a moral compass. So again, in a situation like, oh my gosh, this George Floyd scenario, do I speak up? What do I do? Am I silent? How do I handle this? It starts off with moral compass. How do I handle transactions in this office? Where, there's gray areas, there's negotiations, there's all these different things that happen around real estate transactions. Do you want to work with somebody who's a little bit shady or somebody who's got a strong moral compass, right? And so, back to the question of like, who do you hire? Well, the first thing you look for are what's their moral compass? Do they have that? If they don't, you got to question whether you even want them as an agent. But the other factor is you don't want to have them in leadership, because now you're going to have an entire culture potentially of shady individuals if you don't have moral compass. So yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you can simply measure by character. And so let's start there. That's one component of that authentic, that foundation. Another piece is, are they willing to work with people? We've also all dealt with people in terms of like, man, that individual, they're really easy to work with. Or there's other people, yeah, they're kind of tough to work with, right? Well, so again, there's a lot of just personal, strengths, just how they are. So you want to have somebody with a strong moral compass, somebody who's easy to work with, meaning that they're collaborative. They're willing to listen in for others, right? That's not just like my way or the highway, but they are able, right, to collaborate there. So those are a couple of just the foundational pieces. And again, there's a lot of science and there's a lot of parts here. And then, so I'll kind of move a little bit into this full range piece. And boy, I got to be very gentle when I don't want people to misinterpret or misunderstand this part. But there's something called the laissez-faire leader. Okay. And the laissez-faire leader is, man, that person that is really easy to get along with, right? Maybe you don't really question their moral compass. They're just, I love them. I love playing golf with them, loving, having a meal with them or having coffee or whatever it is. But when it comes to the business, they're laissez-faire, meaning they're on this one side of the spectrum. Hey, if you have any questions, come, I'm available for you. And that is kind of a go-to that we've always done in leadership. Just, I'm available for you, right? So you're kind of on this area of this laissez-faire, right? Whereas somebody who's a little bit past that laissez-faire is, hey, let's check to see how Aaron did same time last year versus this year, right? This is still the transactional, actually, not even the transformational. All I'm doing is just like, I got a process in place where every year I need to measure, right? Because it's mid-year right now, right? So I need to do a little mid-year review of Aaron. How is his number of deals this year versus last year, right? Is he up? Is he down? How much has COVID impacted him? Has it impacted him emotionally? Has it impacted his business? Where's his listings? Like what's going on? And it's not going to take me that long to at least just, take a look at, my system and just to check the transaction number. But that is taking a further step, not laissez-faire. Hey, if Aaron needs me, I'm available for him, right? That's not that. I've taken this additional step with my team where I've got processes in place. Hey, let's see what's going on with Aaron. Oh, let's actually get Aaron connected to a group, right? Because one of the things that I really create is this culture. And again, culture is one of those things that we all just generally talk about, but we don't really have a philosophy, strategy, or tactics. And so if there's one thing that maybe people take away from when we say culture, don't say culture just as a standalone. Say this full phrase, culture of belonging, right? We as humans, we need to belong, right? And so if you're creating a culture, create specifically a culture of belonging. Hey, is Aaron feeling alone right now? Considering the fact that none of us are in the office very much, and that was always the case anyway, but now especially more so than ever before. As a leader, one of the things I got to make sure is that Aaron feels like he belongs to this office, to this brand, to this a team, right, of cohorts, not even necessarily like an official team structure, but he feels like he belongs. That's all part of this leadership. So I got to make sure every single agent that's part of my, my group, I've got to make sure that they feel like they belong. So that's all part of this leadership, right? And again, now as I start to move from this transactional to this transformational, so I've got this authentic base. I'm being better when it comes to transactional processes. And then I move into, wow, now how can I inspire, right? And, there's a lot, again, there's four kind of elements of even on this transformational side. But as we even think about ideas like, how do I inspire somebody? I'm not necessarily an inspirational person. Well, sure you are. If you basically made an impact on somebody, you're an inspiration, right? If you were a salesperson and you've got great skills, you can be an inspiration. If you are eating healthier, you're an inspirational person. So we just need to almost start to redefine how we kind of consider inspiration. By just taking time with people, listening in. That's all part of could be part of inspiration. So as we as leadership start thinking, okay. I've got part of my recruiting process is to make sure everybody feels like they belong. And how can I inspire? Just by putting those questions starting to be out there more, we're going to start to make this slow, start of the slow journey and process to becoming more of this transformational leader. And of course, everybody can Google, transactional, transformational, or full range leadership. There's lots of articles and books and concepts and videos and TED Talks for that matter on the topic. But it is something that we need to just dive a little bit deeper on, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's an underutilized conversation, and I think it's a certain audience, especially. I mean, a lot of the stuff is either targeted to a leader of an entire company or to the agent, and there's this whole group of people in the middle that there's not a lot of content, not a lot of focus out there that have a huge, significant impact. We talk about an organization like John Scott, right? Great leadership from the top, but also needs to rely on middle leadership when you have a company of that size, right? So it's just as important, if not more important, that they're also getting the help in terms of being able to do this. And I think you bring up a really interesting point about the laissez-faire leadership. It really just comes down to a proactiveness, which is difficult to do. It's something that across the board, whether you're in leadership or you're in sales, working with clients, if you can say, hey, let me know when you need help, that has a certain effect, right? But if I can say, hey, let me come to you proactively with something that I know is probably going to help you, totally different impact, totally significant outcome from that. and it leaves an impression, which I think is extremely important. So we talk about, either how do you look at hiring, but also your own self. A lot of leadership came from selling themselves. They're extremely successful at the job themselves, so they came into leadership. So, I'm not going to hire a different me necessarily. So how, as leadership of a company, do I improve my coaching skill set, as you put? Where do I go for that? It's not natural for me to be inspirational. Where do I go to improve those coaching skill sets?
Yeah, yeah. So, I've got this little, one of the phrases that my wife taught me is the VUCA world, right? So the VUCA world, it's an acronym, VUCA, and it's a military term actually, and it's basically when you're at war or you're in battle, you're in a constant state of VUCA, and VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? And talk about the real estate world. Is it volatile? Is it uncertain? Is it complex? Is it often ambiguous? Yes, right?
Chaos.
And
Chaos.
so now I'm the leader, right? Agents are already feeling like this VUCA world. I've got to kind of put on this hat of confidence that I've got it all together. Like that whole thing. And yet, the leaders often, right? The brokers, they are exhausted, right? In fact, the people who are listening, it's like, man, that's me. I feel exhausted right now. I got to learn how to figure out Zoom and screen sharing and all these other new skills. And now you're saying that I've got to completely redefine how I'm currently managing. Are you kidding me? I don't have the time for this. I'm still trying to sell some real estate and I'm still trying to figure it all out. And I think that's where, again, we've got to have the resources. We've got to kind of relook at transforming ourselves to become a transformational leader. That's one of the things that I want to do is there's a lot of mindset experts that are out there. Like my wife, and then there's the Pacific Institute. There's great coaches out there, independents, who coach all sorts of other leaders in the space. And that's kind of actually one of the things that I want to do is bring together some of those minds, as well as real estate experts, also like the thought leaders. And boy, can we create a platform, an LMS, the learning management system, specifically designed for leaders? Because again, the brokers out there, managers who are, feeling like I'm reading articles. I've got a subscription to Inman. I watch YouTube. I watch, these active pipe conversations. They're helpful. But in terms of what are some next steps, I need tactics. I need really specific, actionable things to do. And that's kind of like, why I formed this company called Green Ocean. It's kind of like this side project. It's built with technology. It's video content. It's kind of a master class, kind of level, content series, for leadership. It's for agents too, but the idea is, boy, can we bring a little bit of help to managers in 5 to 7 minute segments where you watch 5 to 7 minutes of a video, and then you can basically check off these action items, these reflective questions. And I think that's kind of just part of the journey. I mean, sometimes some of the best books that we've read, right, is just like, man, that was really impactful. Now, what were my action items as a result of that? Oftentimes we're kind of stuck with knowing what to do next. And that's where, I think in today's world, modern technology, great thought leaders, experts in the field, they can basically share. And that's kind of like, why I did Green Ocean, is really to bring that to that group, right? To leaders, to brokers, because I think the change is going to continue to happen. I think, again, the iBuyer conversation, all these different consumer behaviors, we're going to have to be, ahead of it, as well as know the action items. So I think that's kind of, that's just part of that strategy overall. And so that ultimately this VUCA term, right, that I just kind of shared, it can not just be volatility or uncertainty, but rather the V can stand for vision, right? The U can stand for understanding, the C can stand for clarity, and the A can stand for agility. And right now, I think the leadership, we need to be more agile than ever before. And so having the right resources, having the right cohorts, having a community of other leaders that we can communicate with on a regular basis, I think that's probably more important than ever before. And so the people are out there. There's other like-minded people like yourself in the same space where we need to grow. And that's, I think, what we need to do is just seek one another out, right? Form that community and be very, like you said, proactive about growing my leadership skills, right? Growing my leadership mindset, so that I can really lead the next generation real estate office, into the next 5, 10 plus years. And in doing so, I'm going to actually have a more valuable asset, right? Which is my company, because of my leadership skills, because of the leadership teams that I formed, because of the process that, our entire group, we're transformational, as a leadership team.
Sure. No, it's a very interesting way to kind of look at it. I kind of think it shows me an image of like a general, during time of war, and all the agents, and just got to keep all of the soldiers, positive and everything.
Right.
So one thing I'm interested in, and it's a difficult question because who really knows, but I think we can all recognize the industry has been changing over the last couple of years, as technology's become bigger and companies like a Compass come into the scene and kind of change how people think about brokerages and everything. I mean, you can go back and forth on that, but when specifically in this time period that we're looking at right now, which in so many ways has been transformative on the market, when we talk about COVID and last couple of months and do you think this time period specifically has changed things for the long term when it comes to how leaders lead, how they should be leading, how they should be thinking about leading? Obviously, there's much more of a digital, virtual aspect to things, but are there things we're not considering or things you predict are going to be long-term changes that, companies that might have been a little more old style before need to take into account now?
Yeah, I mean, it's whenever we talk about the future, it's like this kind of fuzzy, thing that's out there. If we, trying to predict 5 years out, or 10 years out. But what's really easy to do is you look back 5 years,
Sure.
right? So you look back 5 years and you look back 10 years. And when we look back 10 years, obviously we had the Great Recession coming out of that, and like, what were all the who were all the people who learned new skill sets back then? And a simple one is, boy, the people who had the short sales skill set immediately thereafter, right? And they weren't experts before, they were immediately experts, in a short period of time after. They were the ones to actually probably succeed and thrive, and they built on that business, and they're probably not doing that anymore, but it was, for that time, but, they developed a new skill set. And we're kind of going through this time in the same way. Boy, if I look 10 years, I'm looking back to this time, and over the next 12 months, I really made a commitment to learning a few of these skills, a few of the ways, really kind of, just as I can be my own consultant, I could simply review the kind of time I'm spending and what I'm doing when it comes to leadership, management, right? How do I make decisions? And then we can be like, wow, just, it didn't even take much time to realize I've got to stop doing things, right? In order for me to stop doing things, I've got to fill that void with new skill sets. And so obviously, I think a lot of people, they're the ones who've embraced Zoom, but they're embracing Zoom or just these groups, online cohorts, right? Wow, I can really take this time to become a better leader. Get back into a new way, I guess, of leading, more so than ever before. I know a lot of people are doing all of a sudden more meetings than ever before through Zoom, but now we can even say, I don't want to just have a sales meeting on Zoom for the sake of having a sales meeting. Let's dive deeper. Let's start to, hey, you guys are all about the CRM, Aaron, right? You guys are all about understanding specific digital audiences and target, content pieces. And we need to almost formulate in the same way in leadership. I need to divide up groups where, they have certain common ground. I need to coach them for individual success. And that's actually part of the transformational leadership that we were talking about earlier, is understanding the individual needs. And oftentimes we treat all agents kind of the same, or we kind of group them in two, the successful ones and the non-successful ones, right? We can't do that anymore. We've got to dive deeper into the individual needs, right? I got to pay individual attention. I got to know exactly, what's Aaron's circumstance, in terms of transactions, in terms of life, in terms of vision, in terms of goals, in terms of behaviors. So I do have to treat you differently. Now, how do I formulate the time? I mean, that is part of the commitment, right? So we need to spend more time individually. And that's what we're telling our agents to do with all their clients. We need to do the same exact thing by really looking at the individual needs, paying individual attention. Can I recommend Aaron a book, specifically that would help him or would just touch him or resonate with him? So I think that's part of this journey that we've got to do. It's not like, it's not like there's just magic answers, but there's individual small bits that we just have to do. And it's the ground game, right? It's just, back to the military kind of concept. It's just like, boy, I've got to just, put the ground forces in place. And that just goes to myself and my leadership team. It's just
Sure.
really what it's about.
Sure. Yeah, the book idea is it's an interesting idea. It's a very practical thing that you can do to help somebody say, I know you're struggling with this. I understand that. Here's something that actually made a difference for me. Here's something you can do right now. It's a very practical thing. Um, Before I jump to the next question, for anybody who's on, feel free to. We're gonna have a time where we're gonna actually answer any questions. You can do the little Q&A uh, little button below and ask any questions for Howard here about anything, whether it comes to leadership, whether it comes to Green Ocean TV, when it comes to any of that kind of stuff. Or if you just want to know how Howard, goes out throughout his day, any questions, feel free to on there. So practically, we talk about like the book idea, practical examples are the things that you have done personally as an example, or maybe the managers that you work with that have done over the last couple of months since all the changes have happened in the markets, practical things that they have done that stood out to you, or things that you are doing personally that you've changed over the last couple of months because of the circumstances.
Yeah, I think a lot of people because of COVID, right? We are in new behavior and new practices, right? So sometimes it like like different external triggers, all of a sudden cause different behaviors. So on one hand, some people are saying, "Oh, well, geez, what are you watching on Netflix these days?" Right? But I always use Netflix as an example because in order for us to start doing something new, we've got to typically stop doing something, right? So again, we all have this time, like we always say time management. We always have to think about more self-management. And so as we start thinking about, okay, well, if I want to develop better leadership skills, or I want to take something new on, well, let's identify something you got to stop doing, right? And so that's one of the things I've been talking to all of my franchise owners, the brokers. What's something that you need to stop doing, or you can stop giving up? And oftentimes, when it comes to time, it is a personal item. Like, for example, the classic late night binging of any kind, right? And so there's so much good stuff I know out there, on Netflix or Amazon or, you name it, one of the platforms that's out there, all vying for that $10 a month or whatever it is. And through that, it's just like, well, shoot, what if I stopped watching past 9 p.m.? I know that's a shocker, right? For example, I stopped watching past 9 p.m. In which case, then, can you get up an hour earlier, right? Because our brains are we can actually do the most amount. Our brains are most creative and refreshed typically in the morning, as long as we've had a good night's rest, right? Somewhere between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. And so like those are often wasted hours if we're spending late night watching and then we get up later because, hey, I can just literally roll out of bed, hop onto an 8 or 9 a.m. call and I'm still good. So it's just like, yeah, but you missed out potentially on 3 hours worth of amazing time, of creative time, of time to work on yourself, working on your business, right? And so that is kind of like one of the first things I would say is, what's your 86 list? The 86 list is anybody who's been in the restaurant business or bar business, you 86, you stop, you've run out of something. And so I'm going to 86, Netflix past 9 p.m. In which case then that commitment to waking up a little bit earlier, that 1 hour earlier, is there. And then what am I going to fill into that 1 hour? Well, that's that hour where you can do some of the reflection. You can do some of the personal reviews. You can take a look at your business, some of the leadership skills, because we need to go back to school. Is basically kind of what we need to do. If we're going to, we're kind of back to that moment of, all right, there's a whole new era, a whole new group of real estate people who are going to come into the business because, they're out of a job, right, potentially, and they've always wanted to go into real estate. So if I'm going to lead them, as well as all the, experienced agents as well, if I'm going to lead them, I've got to, develop for 1 hour a day my leadership skills. That 1 hour is going to, of course, it's going to be a competitive, unfair advantage for you over all the other leaders that are out there. So again, you want to recruit to something, recruit to your coaching skill. Recruit to the fact that, at your office, the average agent does 12 deals, right? The average agent, not 2 or 3 deals, right? Which might be the industry standard. So it's just like, well, shoot, if I'm an agent, I'm a sharp individual, I'm going to come into the business. Do I want to go work for a leader who coaches and runs an office where the average agent does 12 deals or 3 deals, right? And so I think that's something that's very specific, that's very tangible. So, you can't just recruit to that unless then you've got the coaching skills to help agents to a high level of productivity. How do I help to a high level of productivity? Back to that individualized attention, which is back to that transformational leadership of knowing exactly where Aaron is in his mindset, in his business, because I reviewed, how many deals you did this year versus last year. And that's a talking point that I can have in a mid-year review.
So it's interesting because you're talking a lot about, changing habits, habit forming, what are going to create kind of like a healthy routine. Um, and you talk also about what I'd love to hear more about is process forming, right? Especially when it comes to, technology, right? And as managers, as leadership, create process with technology. Is that a part of the function, or is that
Yes.
just a distraction?
My God, yes. Okay, so um, you know what? I think I hope leaders have heard this before. Your email system is not your project management system. Right?
Fair
And
enough.
yet we spend the majority of time, the statistic actually for US workers, that is, so not real estate specifically, but for US workers, is that the average US worker spends 6 hours a day on email. And that's not to say they're only on email, but email is always a window that's open. So you're trying to get some work done, an email comes in, you try to respond to that email, then you're trying to get back to whatever else you're trying to do, or you're literally just in an email, right? Outlook, which is great, right? But literally you're trying to make Outlook or email like your project management system. So your action items and you got this ridiculous and a file folder system of all the deals and agents and transactions. It's not, email's not designed for that. Email is email communication, right? That's what that is. So the most important thing I would say is, if you are a leader, move into a project management system, right? You've got to move over from email to project management. That way, if you're in project management, you could clearly see, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your objectives? What are your key results? I mean, everybody's heard of the 12-week year. That was a book that was promoted for years ago. A great book, right? The better one, or another one along that line, is called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. It's kind of like how Google and Amazon, all the big companies, go by objectives and key results. And so you've got a clear 12-week objective, and you're going to measure key results, and you're going to do that through a project management system. And there's a million different project management systems. I would say that oftentimes they're complex. So pick a simple one like Basecamp. Basecamp is free. You can, your first like 3 projects is free. So get started with that and just start to put your action items, your to-dos, your message board, just start using a simple system so that you're no longer living in email, you're living in project management. And then another really simple tool is the Pomodoro, right? And so I think a lot of people have heard of the Pomodoro, which just means tomato in Italian, but it's a concept where for 25 minutes, you have uninterrupted time, right? And there's an app for that. You can literally buy a tomato timer, but for 25 minutes, are you ready for this? You don't check email for 25 minutes, right? Dare I say, you turn your phone off or put it in another room for
Or put
25 minutes.
another
Oh
room.
my God. Are you kidding me? You want me to have my phone in another room for 25 minutes? Well, put it this way, if you're doing it at 6 a.m., you're probably a little bit more comfortable with it, right? So with project management, if you can work a straight 25 minutes working on a project, understanding and learning and developing something, we're going to get so much further ahead. Then, of course, for the 5 minutes, you can check, your email, you can check your phone, text, anything like that, and then go into another 25-minute block. So there you go. There's your 2 25-minute project management blocks that will just revolutionize probably your business. And anybody who's read books or understands, these processes, or follows David Allen, or all these kind of things in terms of like processes, understanding where email works but where project management really needs to take its place, inboxes and outboxes. I mean, that's just that's not necessarily a transformational thing, that's more of a transactional thing. But we do need to move away from, I would say, email, to make that commitment, first and foremost.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't lose too many people's interest when you said put your phone away. So I think we're still
They're
okay.
watching from their phone right now, so
Yeah, I watch on the phone and now I just like I can't do that. Makes a lot of sense. So one question that interests me, that I think would be funny. So your wife has is an organizational psychologist, correct? So I imagine she's taught you a lot about organizational psychology. Was there anything that she's told you or talked to you about the science of organizational psychology that actually surprised you? I imagine a lot of it is pretty, I imagine you hear it, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Was there anything you like, oh, I totally thought it was this way,
Yeah.
that the science just doesn't back up, or there's something different that we should be considering?
Yeah. I mean, again, she's an academic, so she does a lot of reading. She does teaching on the theories, and then we're a good mix because I will often share with her specific examples, and so in the actual workplace, and so the kind of where academics and actual practical application, we're always like kind of going back and forth. One of the areas that she highly recommended, for coaches is especially for kind of new leaders, people going into leadership for the first time, like maybe team leaders, or you're maybe rethinking about the way that you're leading. And it's this whole notion called act like a leader, think like a leader. Okay, and so it's I think her name is Yibara or Yabara, right? Who is the author of this book and this concept, and she's also a psychologist in the space. But the idea that she challenged was, a lot of times you think you got to think like a leader, and then you start acting like one, right? And this kind of reverses it. So it's actually, I don't want to say it in this way, but maybe it's the simplest way to explain it. It's kind of fake it till you make it
Right.
idea, right? But the idea is that no, what you need to do is you need to just start doing behavior like leadership, right? And then as you start to do the behaviors on a regular enough basis, all of a sudden you start thinking like the leader. Okay. And so a lot of times we have that kind of mindset or that lack of confidence. Oh, I'm not really a leader. That's not me. That's not my style. I'm not like this, super, extroverted. I'm not a good speaker. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening. And so and it's not definitely about introversion or extroversion, although of course that always, to a degree takes part. But the idea is that, no, let's just start acting like a leader in leadership ways. Again, can you have a good moral compass? What does that moral compass look like? How can you make that real? Again, let's talk about the George Floyd situation. How can you act like a leader right now in this circumstance? How can you lead a conversation with a team, right, about that topic and the emotions and all these things that's happening? And there's great tools. NAR is producing so many great tools, along that line. So, but we can use that to facilitate great conversations. And all of a sudden, people, right, your agents, in fact, the agents you're also trying to recruit, they start to see you a little bit differently. Oh, thank you so much for leading that conversation, right? And again, all of a sudden, as I'm personally being transformed as a leader, I'm finding that my organization, my business is starting to be transformed. The way that I start acting actually starts to be, and thinking actually starts to be transformed because I'm acting like that first. So you start to pick a couple of leadership action style items, right? And then all of a sudden, oh, I guess I am a leader. I guess I am this way. So your brain just starts to kind of come along. And that's just part of, that was just like one of those areas where I thought you always have to work on your mindset first, and then you would become more of this leader. And this kind of just flips it. So that was like one of the things that I think she brought up that I've been challenging again, my leadership team on.
It's a good point if you feel like maybe it's not something that is inherent, that you just have as that leadership skill. That's okay. Do the actions and it will come. Which also, you brought something we haven't talked about yet, but is new leaders, right? If someone's going to be starting a brokerage, starting a franchise, starting a team, right? What would you tell them their 30, 60, 90 should look like? What they should be doing practically, from the point of, okay, I'm becoming in some type of leadership role. How should I be approaching this? My first month, second month, third month.
Yeah, I think that a really good practical place is, can you define the difference between as a leader, management, right, coaching, training, mentoring. That's kind of a simple place because oftentimes we use these words interchangeably, right? But they all kind of have some different nuances, right? You can even throw in counseling, right? Counseling, consulting. I mean, those are these additional ones. But when it comes to manager as coach or leader as coach, right? I think that's probably the first thing that you guys really start to think through. Coaching is, and it's hard for me because I love training. I love, like, when I learn a new concept, I want to just give the answer, right? But when it comes to really developing somebody, this is where that coaching, and even the word coaching, especially I think in the real estate space, as we think about like maybe the Buffinis and Ferries and some of that kind of coaching, there's oftentimes what we call accountability coaching. And again, accountability coaching, that takes on a little bit of a different form than the type of, maybe ad hoc or even formalized coaching that we're talking about here as a leader. And so accountability, Aaron, did you make these number of calls this week? Right? That's one form of coaching, right? It's accountability. Did you do it? And again, I think there's a place for that. And, part of the reason why I was successful in selling real estate. But when it comes to, really, I know an answer, in terms of like your business development kind of methods, why you're having a struggle making calls on a weekly basis to get listing appointments, or, giving a home update, to all your homeowners who are probably curious in terms of, has my home value gone up or down since COVID, right? Probably about 99% of all homeowners are curious about that, but agents aren't notifying them. So as a leader, that's a very specific skill set. So I could tell, hey, Aaron, why don't you pick 10 people and call them this week, right? And give them a little market update. That's kind of like training, right? I'm basically like, like giving you something to do. Whereas a coaching session might be like, well, let's talk about, your business. I mean, it's getting you to have that creative commitment so that it's really like, oh, I've come up with this answer, right? And then it forms into a much more deeper seated philosophical approach than Aaron, and the rest of the team might do. So again, that coaching skill. And the thing is, like, I just want to give you the answer so bad. Aaron, this week by Wednesday, I want you to, go into, like make 10 calls, and here's exactly what you say. I want to do that so bad because it's gonna be satisfying, right? But, for me to coach you instead, to come to a solution that might, and again, I can also coach and lead you to an answer versus truly coaching you so that, this is the long-term play where you're going to be a more developed individual as a result. So, it goes back to, to answer your question, I need to define when I'm training, when I'm consulting, right? There's appropriate places for that, and that's okay. But when I'm coaching somebody, I need to make sure that I am coaching. I am clearly in a new coaching mindset and method and behavior myself. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, just separating out the differences and knowing when to do which, right?
Yeah, it's again, it's a skill, but it's also a learned skill. And like what you're saying, if you're going to be focusing on those first 90 days, this should be something you put a lot of time and effort into. I get this question a lot, but
hey, Aaron, I also just want to say but if it's an urgent deal doctor situation, you don't want to try to, you just need to give them the answer. So I'm not, that's not what we're talking about here, right? So this is the longer term. I'm developing somebody, and that's part of my overall philosophy. I just want to make that part clear. It's just like somebody's got a really like important question at the moment. You might want to just answer that one, right? So yeah.
Yeah, my CRO loves to joke with me, and I know anytime I come with a question saying, hey, how would you approach this, comes right back and says, well, how would you approach it?
There you go.
Eventually, yes, if something's an emergency, you need an answer right now. So it's a balance as all things. Is there specific things that you're going to want to also be tracking as a leader? In the last couple of minutes here, what are specific things, people use phrases like KPIs and all of that I'm going to want to be tracking and saying, okay, I'm on goal here or I'm behind? Because a lot of this stuff's very qualitative. If we want to bring it down to how do I track this stuff?
Yeah.
What can I be doing?
Yeah. So data is really important, even in the, organizational and behavioral psychology and all of that, you need to have data, right? And so oftentimes, and I think at this point, or hopefully most leaders know the difference between lead indicators and lag indicators, but often you do need to focus on the lead indicators. You need to often focus on the OKRs, the objectives and key results, right? What are you measuring on a week-to-week basis? But I want to throw out something from, this is back to that John Doerr book, which is called CFRs, right? Are you measuring CFRs? And a CFR is, are you measuring conversations? Okay. Are you measuring feedback? And are you measuring recognition? Right? So simple tactic, I guess. Go back 1 week, look at your calendar and say, boy, let's measure how many coaching conversations have I had this week, right? It's a simple one. What were the results of those conversations? How were those, right? So this is just a little self-assessment in terms of like, gosh, I only had 4 conversations, 4 coaching conversations. I need to increase that, and these coaching conversations do not have to be 1 hour sessions. It could be the 5-minute check-in. Hey, Aaron, I noticed you did like one of those virtual open houses. I'm just checking in on you. How'd it go? What was the success of that? What could you have done differently next time? Oh, so, how did your sellers like it? Well, yeah, what can you do, to maybe improve, the actual, views, through Facebook or what have you? Have you thought about that? So I mean, that's just measuring a conversation. Feedback. Hey, Aaron, I just want to say, I want to give you a little bit of feedback, if that's okay. One of the things I noticed is that you shared it on your Facebook, but you didn't share that virtual tour on your seller's Facebook. Because if you do that, you're actually going to increase the audience by tagging them, right? So, so I'm giving you feedback. So this is a little bit of after you've done something, and they're like, man, conversation is one, and coaching conversation is one thing, but giving feedback. And you know who also often needs feedback that we don't often give feedback on is your staff, right? Your support team. Ask them, hey, am I giving you guys enough feedback? The answer will be no. They're just kind of doing what they're doing, right? So give them feedback. And finally, of course, recognition. What can you recognize, right? So it's not just about who's got the number of deals, the most number of deals. Hey, you got a new sale, you got a new listing. We often recognize the top producers, and it's the same old, same old. We often recognize the same people for the number of deals that they do. We've got to recognize when people try something new, right? When they're basically doing one of those lead activities. Oh, this week I called one of those people and did a, CMA out via Zoom. It was the first time I did that. Man, you need to give some recognition there, right? So let's make sure you're highlighting them, you're making them feel good, and you're also giving those shout outs to the entire team, right? To everybody. Hey, I just want to recognize that Aaron, hey, this week for the first time you did a Zoom, you did a screen share, you were nervous about it, you're proactive about it. I just want to congratulate you because it takes, it's nervous to do that the first time around. So if you measure things, right? OKR, your objectives and key results, of course, all that's important, your lead indicators, lag indicators, but the number of conversations, feedback, and recognition items, right? Really make sure that that's the relationship. That's back to the culture stuff, culture of belonging that you're creating, right? So I would say, as a leader, build that in early into your career. If you're late in your career, just realize, man, I wish I gave more recognition. We all remember times when we were recognized still as little kids, when we got a ribbon of some kind, when somebody's just said a great word to us and it just made us feel great. That stays with us our entire life. So as a leader, as a manager, as a broker, do more conversations, feedback, and recognition than ever before. And that will make you just a better leader.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think it reminds me of a concept I think Ninja Selling teaches in terms of creating habits, but to start each day with thanking somebody can oftentimes put you on the right track for having a very productive day. And so it's a similar idea. You can essentially leave it as a marker each day to find somebody in your organization as a leader to recognize or to thank. And it tends to have an effect on you personally as a leader, but also, like you're saying, it can have much more of an effect on that person than you probably imagine. So I think it's a really great point. Well, we're coming up on time here. Yep, gratitudes are definitely essential. Coming up on time here. I really appreciate taking the time. I think it's been really helpful, and I definitely implore people to check out Green Ocean TV, some of the really cool things you guys are doing over there. To hit up Howard directly. I mean, obviously you see just the wealth of knowledge. We've only tapped into a little bit of it here. So I really appreciate you taking the time on here. What I'd love doing at the end of these is asking, is there any new hobby that you've taken on now in quarantine? I've seen people that are starting to pickle things. I have people trying to get me to make sourdough. Is there a new hobby that you've personally taken on?
Yeah. So it's not so much a hobby, but it's an intention. Let me say that, right? So I've got three boys. I've got a 20-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 15-year-old, and we all are in the home, obviously, right, together. But they're all online doing their thing, and so I'm just trying to be much more intentional about quantity of time. And this goes to the people who know Zig Ziglar, that we always use this word quality of time. And it's not about the quantity, but it's about the quality of time. And Zig Ziglar had this phrase that said, you'll never get quality time. It's only in quantity of time that you'll find quality moments, And so I'm just trying to spend more quantity of time, because I think we're all kind of in this boat right now of like, why does it feel like I'm working more than ever before? Right? I'm on more Zoom calls than ever before. So just when it comes to family, I'm just trying to spend more quantity of time with the kids individually, with my spouse, with my parents, with my sisters, and all that kind of stuff, that type of thing. So yeah, it's more of an intention than a hobby, but it feels oddly kind of like a hobby because it's something new. I haven't spent this amount of quantity of time or this much intention in that, and that's been good.
That's great. I think that's probably the most wholesome answer I've received yet on that question. So that's great. Well, awesome, Howard. Well, I really appreciate it. Excited for all the things that you guys are going to be doing. And this video again is going to be sent out so everybody else can watch it again. Please feel free to reach out to Howard, reach out to us directly. Make sure to tune in on next week when we're doing another Industry Insiders panel talking about data. But thank you again, Howard, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.